We're very lucky to have with us in the studio my good friend Josh Reinstein, who is the founder of the Christian Allies Caucus in the Israeli Knesset, as well as the Israel Allies Foundation. Josh is basically one of the first people to understand that Israel does have good friends outside of our own community, and really using that as power and as lobbying in different parliaments around the world. Josh, I've seen the incredible work that you've done. So let's look at what happened last week and give us a little bit of a sense of how the Christian community, and I guess maybe it's obvious for some people, but how the Christian community was pivotal maybe in getting the Republicans the big win that it did. But obviously not everywhere. But tell us give us a little bit of your analysis on that.
Well, we've seen around the world that it's Christians, not countries, that stand with Israel. Christians bring their countries with them.
That's interesting.
The base of the Republican Party are Bible-believing Christians. You cannot get elected to the presidency, the House, the Senate without being supportive of Israel. And I've heard of a lot of misinformation about what is Trump going to do this time? What's his relationship like with Bibi? What does he think about this and that when it comes to Israel? I think it's all irrelevant. I think that he knows that his base are Bible-believing Christians. They want Israel, and he's going to give it to them. And so I think we have a huge opportunity. And Bible-believing Christians came out in droves this time, as well as Catholics, which is a new thing as well.
Yes, because Catholics were not traditionally big supporters of Israel. In fact, people were worried about the Catholic community. You're saying that not only did they vote for Trump this time, but they voted, more people voted from the Christian community? There was a higher voting rate?
Yeah, there was a higher turnout. There was more mobilization. There's a woman named Paula White, who's the pastor of President Trump, who worked very hard from behind the scenes to get the pastors involved. There was actually voter registration in churches, which they haven't done in a long time because of the Jackson-Vanik Act. There was an act that stopped them from mobilizing support that was annulled in the first term by Trump. So we're seeing a great move of success, not just in America, but all over the world, of Bible-believing Christians coming together, standing with Israel, and getting involved in the political process, which is a very important aspect.
So I know you've got friends and a chapter also in Holland. What are they saying?
We have 53 Israel Allies caucuses around the world. Next week, we're going to start our 54th caucus in the Portuguese parliament. So the network is growing. One of our biggest caucuses is in Holland. And what was interesting is after the last election, when Geert Wilders won the election, about 3 of our top members of our caucus, one of them became the foreign minister, one became the defense minister, and one became the internal security minister.
So what are they saying?
They're saying it's go time. I think we're going to see a major response. I think they underestimated the resolve of the current government. We have a pro-Israel government in Holland for the first time in a very long time. And I think the response is going to be swift, and it's going to be all-encompassing. I know that my Christian friends there, and I'll actually be there next week, are really appalled by what happened. The pressure's on to make an example of the people that did the pogrom. And I think we're going to see something astounding.
What would that look like? Because as far as I know, and we've been following this, not one of the people who participated in the pogrom were actually arrested and are being detained. So what can the community do? What do we hope that they do? And what do you really think is going to happen?
Well, you got to look at the coalition agreement that was signed between the new Dutch government. They're starting with deportations, taking away citizenship, exiling people who are there illegally. This is the first time they're doing those things, and it takes time to ramp that up. What we saw in Amsterdam is a weak response from the mayor of Amsterdam and the police department, but that's local politics. The national level, there's been a very big, fierce reaction. We saw the press conference with our foreign minister, Gideon Saar, last week, and the president saying that just wait to see what's going to happen now. And I think it's going to be a real sea change in how they react. So you think it's
going to be an impetus for actual change throughout Amsterdam when it comes to
Holland, the whole of Holland.
Holland, sorry.
Yeah, I think that you're going to see not just in the next week or month things, but for the next year, you're going to see a real turnaround of what's happening in Holland.
That would be nice.
And I think this will be a prototype for other countries in Europe as well.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Do you think this could be like a knock-on effect everywhere else where you have this type of violence and anti-Semitism?
Absolutely. They were trying to make this about Israel and make this about the war in Israel, and everyone sees it's not true. This is a coordinated attack against the Jewish community, Israelis who are there for a soccer game. So I think that we're going to see a major response in Holland, and that's going to spread. You have to understand also that the governments have changed not just in Holland, but in Italy, in Sweden, in Hungary, in Czech Republic, in Portugal.
In Sweden also? I thought Sweden is still holding strong with the left.
Absolutely not. The hijab ban goes into effect in Sweden in 2025. They're starting to roll out their deportation plans. The government of
Who's
Sweden,
going to get deported? Like, how do you qualify for a deportation? What does that look like?
well, they're just like in America, there's a lot of illegal immigrants in these countries, and they've been given asylum.
Got it.
And a lot of these people have left other countries that they get asylum to come to more prosperous countries. So I think the first step is they're going to go after all the illegals, but also they're going to make new changes to their laws so that if you're involved in terror, if you're involved in anti-Semitism, you can be repealed.
Amazing, just asylum, your citizenship.
So, Josh, you're always such an optimist, honestly. You are. And you always, because you're in the front lines and you see the people fighting back and you do deal with Christians who love Israel, etc. So do you really think that this is now Europe fighting back, or Europe will fight back? Because a lot of us think Europe is done.
Well, I think there's two Europes. I think there's New Europe and Old Europe, as Donald Rumsfeld once said. New Europe is Eastern Europe and Old Europe is Western Europe.
Right.
I think there are a lot of countries that are done. I don't see France getting out of this. I'm worried about the UK.
Yeah.
Brussels have already pretty much fallen into Belgium.
Yeah.
But there are countries that will fight back, and I think it starts now. I don't know if there's been a lot of reports of what's happening in Germany, but if you even say Hamas, they're
Yes.
knock at your door.
They just passed a law. Absolutely.
I mean, people are cracking down around Europe. It might be too late for some countries, but the fight's going to start now, and I think you're going to see a real response to what's going on. You also have to understand that a lot of people were hesitant to say anything about Israel because of the Biden administration. The Biden administration came out, they started parroting Hamas lines like there's a genocide going on, which there isn't. They started withholding ammunition, tractors, weaponry. They started siding with international organizations against Israel. So people in Europe are like, well, we're not going to go against the United States. Now that Trump's coming back, everyone knows that the message is out. It's Israel and America back together again, and you got to...
That's so interesting. So that's how Europe connects to the United States. And now these leaders from the right-wing parties who've actually won elections have that backing that they didn't have before. Let's go back to America. A lot of people, and I sat here a few months ago with Ambassador David Friedman, and I asked him, people say Trump is not going to be the same Trump. He's fallen out with Bibi. We don't know where he's going to go. We don't know how pro-Israel he's going to be this time. Talk to us a little bit about his cabinet, the people. I know, and that's what he said, he doesn't want war. How the hell is this all going to wind up?
Well, I think, again, that was a complete miscalculation. A lot of people thought he was pro-Israel because he has Jewish children.
Yeah.
They thought maybe he's pro-Israel because he's friends with Bibi.
Right.
Or maybe he just has an affinity for Israel beyond other people. It's not true. Those may all be true, but that's not why he supports Israel. He supports Israel because of the base of his party, and that's Bible-believing Christians. The cabinet that he's bringing on is phenomenal for Israel. I mean, you just hear
Tell us a bit
one by
about-
one. You have Elise Stefanik that they just announced for the UN. I mean, no one's been stronger on the issue of anti-Semitism on campuses.
Nobody.
People forget that during the Trump administration, he passed the executive order and anti-Semitism.
Yes.
I think you're going to see anyone who protests in favor of a terror organization like Hamas being arrested, some being deported. So I think on the domestic front, I think Jews are going to be a lot safer in America. But on the Israel front, you see a lot of people like Richard Grenell. He's being talked
He's
about.
great.
Amazing.
They talked about him for Secretary of State.
And now they're talking for National Security Advisor. Every name that comes up are people that are pro-Israel, but it's not by chance. It's because their base are Bible-believing Christians, and they need to get elected to their positions as well in some cases. So now that these names are coming up, we're seeing an incredible push towards Israel. And the message is out. People know if you want to stand with America, if you want American support, you better stand with Israel. It's going to be a new dawn come January 20th. And I think you're going to see big movement, not just in Europe, but in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia.
In the Middle East already.
And of course, in the Middle East, you already see people, coming on. Iran was supposed to attack us during election day. You don't hear about the attack anymore. You don't hear about the threats. Hamas is saying maybe we should make peace. Things are going to change pretty rapidly here in the Middle East because we finally, once again, have the backing of America. And I think that the weakness from the Biden administration during this time, and I know a lot of people say, well, they did this and they did that, but the messaging and the weakness that came out of Washington has been a disaster for the Middle East policy. It's turned not just war here, but war in Ukraine, war in almost in Taiwan, fighting between North Korea and South Korea, the Afghanistan debacle. I mean, it's just been a disaster after disaster because a strong America means peace and a weak America means war.
I think I'd like to also, as much as I do thank our Christian brothers and sisters for their support, it's Americans and other Europeans also support Israel because Israel is a democracy, because we are who we are, because we aren't radical like the rest of the Middle East, and they know it's important. So when we talk about the people in Europe and also the people in America who are afraid to say something, I think it's also about, can they say something for themselves as well? Meaning it's not only, I don't think it's only about Israel. I think it's that they don't want these elements in their own countries. They don't want to see Hamas or terrorists or whatever take over, not only because of Israel, because it's not good for them either. Right. So I just think it's important to talk about the fact that we have allies not only because of the Christian belief in the Bible, but because they also believe in democracy and in peace and not being radical.
Well, you have to separate the people from the politicians. 82%, I think, of Americans stand with Israel. And it's not because of the Bible.
Right. Yeah.
It's because, we're doing the freedom democracy in the Middle East, so that rights for all of our citizens. We have free elections, free media. Yeah. They can land a plane here at any time. And we're the only stability in the Middle East. But the politicians, they take their cues from their supporters.
Absolutely.
Democrats take their cues from Jewish Americans for the most part, because 55% of the money Democrats raise is from Jews in America. So we always had a stacked deck. We had the Republicans because of the Christians. We had the Democrats because of the Jews. Obama comes in and he proved that you can actually get the support from the Jewish community without being pro-Israel. And that's where the deterioration started. And then people in the Democrat Party said, well, how anti-Israel, how anti-Jewish can we be and still get support from Jewish Americans? And it turns out there is no limit. They can be as
well, they don't see it that way. They think that, of course, that they can, the liberal values that we're not, or right-wing governments in Israel do not stand for their liberal values. That's how they justify that to themselves.
I mean, they can justify it, but still there are people marching in the streets saying death to the Jews, from the river to the sea, and all these terrible things that are happening in the community. And you can ignore it and you can say, well, it's because of a right-wing government in Israel, but it doesn't really make sense. You're not going to see that next time, in this next administration. And then I think Jews are going to have to say, why? Why aren't we seeing it now? And we saw it before. And it's because Israel was an important issue to them, but not the most important. There were a lot of social agendas. There were a lot of liberal issues that were important to them. We were maybe, 6 or 7 down on the list. And because of that, Israel kind of fell to the wayside. I believe, though, that this is a wake-up call. The Jewish Americans are fiercely pro-Israel, if you ask them.
Yes.
When you look at their agenda. I think there's going to be a big push now within the Democratic Party to come back to the side of Israel. And that's just very positive. That gives us both sides of the aisle once again, like we had 10, 15 years ago.
Well, I hope you're right that this will be the conclusion of this terrible loss that, we were talking earlier, that they don't like chaos. They don't like everything that they've been seeing. It's not their first agenda item, of course, the Middle East. The economy is probably their first agenda item. The second is probably immigration, illegal immigration. But still, it's that sense of chaos or weakness that regular Americans don't want to see. And just to conclude, Josh, how do you there's so many people in America who are shocked by the result. But when I spoke to people like you for the last few months, you were telling us, there's going to be a change. Did you expect the change to be so large?
I did. I have to say that I think that people in America are really suffering. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and I went back there in the summer with my family, and it doesn't look like Dallas, Texas anymore. There's been some big changes. People are hurting in the pocketbook. There's a lot of crime on the streets.
Yeah.
People are worried about their freedoms. The people made a big deal about the fight for democracy against Trump, but really I think that issue helped them. When people knew that Kamala's plan was to stack the Supreme Court, to stop the filibuster in the Senate, to make free speech not available on social media platforms, people saying, wait a minute, I don't like the way this is going. I remember the time when the ACLU would fight for the right for the KKK to say whatever they want because freedom of speech was an important value, and it's still an important value. So yeah, I did see a sea change coming here. I was a little worried about, how it's going to play out and what's going to happen. Is it going to take a long time or the votes going to be counted? But it happened real fast. And I think everyone understands that the American people are now moving in a direction because they want more peace and prosperity.
Well, Josh Reinstein, thank you for the incredible work that you do, being our ambassador out there. And thank you for this analysis.
No, thank you. I think that we're living in a time that for people who believe in the Bible, it's really miraculous. You can see the scripture that we read done during Shabbat and what's happening in the news, and they line up. I mean,
so true.
I think it's a great time for us, and I'm very long on Israel. Our future is going to be blessed.
God bless you. Thank you.
Amen.